Many women think that the problem is jealousy, but the hole is much deeper. No one talks about it openly, but the truth is, jealousy doesn't come out of nowhere. It grows where self-esteem is wounded. And you know what's worse? The more she tries to hide this emotional insecurity, the more it explodes in the form of control, distrust, and fear of losing. It's not just him who's strange. It's her mind that has already been programmed by trauma and comparisons to believe that it's never enough. Have you ever felt like this? That feeling that no matter how much he says he loves you, something inside you doesn't believe him? The good news is that you can turn this game around. And no, it's not by changing him. It's by changing what happens inside you. This content will show you how to break this cycle, strengthen your self-worth, and regain your confidence. But beware. What you're going to learn here could confront everything you've been taught to date about love relationships. Jealousy, more often than not, doesn't come from the other person. It springs up inside the woman, like a distorted mirror of herself. Behind the impulse to watch, to distrust, to compare herself to any shadow that crosses her partner's path, lies a deep feeling of inadequacy. Am I enough? Women with fragile self-esteem tend to see themselves through the lens of fear of losing out, constant distrust, and silent comparison with others. She may seem secure on the outside, but inside she carries doubts that consume her. Does he still find me attractive? What if he falls for someone else? Anxious attachment masquerades as love, when in fact it's a desperate attempt to feel validated. Sometimes it all starts with a glance at social media, a random like, and that's it. The mind builds an entire movie based on emotional insecurity, fed by years of low self-esteem. Excessive jealousy, in this case, is not a lack of love. It's a lack of self-worth. When a woman doesn't recognize her own light, any glare from others becomes a threat. And the more she tries to guarantee the other person's love, the further she moves away from herself. But that's only the beginning of the thread. What many don't realize is that these roots were usually planted long before the current relationship. Many women grow up hearing that they need to try harder to be loved. Others have been dumped, betrayed, or made invisible in previous relationships, and this leaves invisible but deep scars. Every rejection they experience becomes a brick in the wall of their emotional insecurity, and every time someone lets them down, their fear of losing becomes stronger. Jealousy doesn't come out of nowhere. It's the wounded voice of the past crying out in the present. Imagine a woman who has been betrayed in a previous relationship. Now, even with a new partner, she feels jealous even of a casual conversation with one of his friends. The problem is not the current situation, but the old wound that still hasn't healed. This kind of anxious attachment comes from trying to prevent the pain from recurring. It's as if the mind is saying, if I keep an eye on everything, I won't suffer again. But this only generates more control and distrust. These previous experiences shape the way she relates to others. If she was criticized in childhood, she may grow up feeling that she will never be enough. If she was abandoned, she will believe that she will always be left out. And so she lives a love story trying to prove that she deserves love. The good news is that, even with scars, it is possible to rewrite the script. But first, she needs to understand how she is trapped in a cycle that makes her love with fear. It's curious how jealousy, which at first appears to be a way of protecting the relationship, in practice does just the opposite. When a woman starts to watch, distrust, or want to control her partner's every move, she's not strengthening the relationship. She's stifling freedom and killing lightness. The attempt to keep the other person close is actually driven by the fear of losing and emotional insecurity. For example, a woman who insists on checking her partner's cell phone, or who gets annoyed when he goes out with his friends, believes she is taking care of the relationship. But over time, this constant control erodes trust. The connection, which should be spontaneous, becomes an obligation. What was supposed to be love becomes tension. And then excessive jealousy creates exactly what she fears most: distance. this toxic cycle is sneaky. It starts with small attitudes, justified by "just be careful," and ends with crises that could have been avoided. When the basis of the relationship is fear and not self-worth, the woman stops being a partner and becomes a watchdog. And the most painful thing? None of this guarantees fidelity. Those who want to cheat even when they're under surveillance. That's why we need to take a deeper look at what lies behind jealousy and reflect on what really keeps two people connected. Controlling each other's every move may seem like security, but it's just a cover for the fear of losing out and a lack of trust. Many women think that if they are in control, they will avoid disappointment. But what they haven't yet realized is that this need for control stems from anxious attachment and emotional insecurity. And this has nothing to do with love. It has to do with fear. Behind this behavior is the difficulty of dealing with the unpredictability of life. The truth is that you can't control someone else's feelings. It's impossible to keep an eye on them 24 hours a day, and trying to do so only feeds the wear and tear. That woman who needs to know his cell phone password, where he is every minute, who he's spoken to, she lives in a state of constant alert, and those who live like this never relax. The big turning point comes when she understands that the real power lies in letting go, in focusing on what is under her control, her faith, her self-worth, her posture, her growth. That's when she learns to give God what she can't control and rest in it. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. And this surrender changes everything, including the way she approaches love relationships. How many times has she thought, he must be with someone else, just because he replied with fewer emojis? These automatic thoughts, quick and silent, are often born of low self-esteem, not reality. It's the mind, used to rejection and emotional insecurity, trying to protect itself, but hurting itself in the process. Mistrust starts in thought and turns into behavior. He takes a long time to respond, and a whole movie of betrayal plays in her head. Only it all happened inside her mind, and not in the real world. The mind, when it's not trained, creates scenarios, suspicions, and assumptions. It's as if it lives in an eternal what if, feeding excessive jealousy and anxious attachment. And the more she feeds these thoughts, the more distant she feels, even if he hasn't done anything. There is a powerful exercise that can help her break out of this cycle. Identify, question, and replace. When she thinks something negative, she can write down, what am I feeling right now? Do I have proof of this? What would be a healthier way of looking at this? Over time, this becomes a new mental pattern, lighter, more rational, freer. There are women who live in love relationships like someone who accepts leftover affection. A message here, a cuddle there, and she clings to it like it's everything. The problem is that when her self-worth is hurt, she starts to believe that this is what she deserves, and that's when jealousy sets in. She feels she's missing out on something she never really had. Imagine a woman who sends 1,000 messages, tries to please, writes herself off, and still gets no attention. Instead of realizing that she's in a space of devaluation, she interprets it as, I need to try harder or he'll dump me. This isn't love, it's fear of losing. It's emotional insecurity disguised as dedication. And this kind of anxious attachment drains her vital energy, undermines her confidence, and reinforces the cycle of constant comparison with other women. The question is tough, but necessary. Why is she fighting so hard for someone who isn't fighting? For her, jealousy here doesn't arise from connection, but from the absence of it. And sometimes what hurts is not what he does, but what she insists on accepting. Only when she starts to ask herself what she really deserves, things start to change. When a woman doesn't know who she is, any crooked glance can shake her. Any like on the social network triggers an internal alert of mistrust. This is because, without a root in her true identity, she becomes vulnerable to the opinions of others, and especially to male validation. Low self-esteem here is just the tip of the iceberg. What lies beneath is a soul thirsting for belonging and love. The disconnection with God takes away her peace and clarity. She tries to fill this void with attention, with messages, with control, but none of it works. When she begins to see herself as God sees her, valuable, complete, worthy, the neediness loses ground. The fear of losing dissolves, because she understands that she doesn't have to force anything to be loved. Healthy love doesn't require emotional begging. Want a practical step? Start with small spiritual habits. Praying when you wake up, reading, verses that affirm your value, moments of silence to listen to your own soul. This reconnects you with what really matters. And when this reconnection begins, even jealousy changes its tune. It stops being a cry of pain and becomes an invitation to deeper reflection. When she understands that love doesn't have to be a daily struggle for attention, something begins to change. What was once excessive jealousy becomes awareness. Anxious attachment gives way to balance. But this process requires action. Nobody rebuilds their self-esteem by waiting for others to do it for them. It's a personal decision, a commitment to their own healing. A woman who decides to get to know herself, seek help, go to therapy, invest in her emotional, spiritual, and even physical growth begins to see the world through different eyes. She no longer compares herself. She knows her self-worth. And because of this, she doesn't subject herself to crumbs. She no longer clings to love relationships that diminish her, nor does she live under the constant tension of emotional insecurity. She lives lightly, with confidence. Find a circle of support. It could be a trusted friend, a self-knowledge group, or even content that feeds your mind with truths about who you are. Combine this with daily moments of prayer or meditation, and most importantly, choose every day not to doubt yourself. Because a woman who believes in who she is becomes emotionally free. Have you ever stopped to think about how many times you've missed out on the lightness of a healthy relationship because of this constant fear of losing? How many times has anxious attachment, shaky emotional control, and silent comparison kept you away from who you really are? Life is calling you to break out of this pattern. And the question remains, how long will you continue to allow low self-esteem to dictate the direction of your heart? If you feel that this content has spoken to you, that it has touched on points that no one has ever explained so clearly, then don't keep it to yourself. Start the process of healing today, of rebuilding your identity and your confidence. And if you want to continue on this journey of emotional transformation, subscribe to the channel. Activate the bell and come with me to learn more about how to strengthen your mind, your value, and your relationships.